Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow, and every rule that has ever governed your life, every law, every custom, every you should and you must, has vanished. No more traffic laws, no job obligations, no social expectations telling you how to dress, who to love, what to believe, or how to live. Your past is irrelevant, your reputation erased, your parents, your teachers, your government, even your God, silent. It's not chaos. There is no punishment waiting, no judgment, just nothing stopping you. You are free, utterly, boundlessly free. And suddenly, your hands begin to tremble, not from joy, but fear. Because now, with no one left to blame, no external script left to follow, every choice you make is yours, fully yours. The shape of your life, your values, your identity, no longer inherited or enforced, but authored by you alone. And it feels like drowning. You scan the silence for orders, for a path, for meaning, but there is only the echo of your own breath and the vast emptiness of possibility. This is the freedom Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of, not the comforting freedom sung about in national anthems or advertised in wellness blogs, but the raw, terrifying kind, the kind that strips you bare and whispers, "Now create yourself or disappear." We think we want freedom, but when it's finally in our hands, unfiltered, unprotected, and absolute, something inside us recoils. Why? Why would we fear the very thing we claim to crave? Why, when no one is stopping us from becoming anything we desire, do we hesitate, collapse, even self-sabotage? Why do we so often trade real freedom for illusion, routine, or obedience? Is it because freedom, in its truest form, isn't about having more options, but about owning the terrifying responsibility of existence? Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free. Condemned, not gifted, not blessed. Condemned. Because with that, freedom comes a burden most of us are not prepared to carry, the burden of authorship. In a world without divine scripts or objective meaning, you must write the story. You must choose the values. You must give your life its purpose and live with the consequences. But what happens when you stare into that abyss and find nothing staring back? What happens when you realize no one is coming to define you? That every mask you've ever worn, student, employee, parent, lover, citizen, was just a role, not an identity? What if the prison we're trying to escape is safer than the wilderness beyond its gates? What if freedom doesn't liberate us, but paralyzes us? Because when you are truly free, there are no more excuses, no more scripts, no more borrowed meaning. Only this chilling truth. You are responsible for becoming who you are, and for many, that is unbearable. So we retreat into systems, into ideologies, into distractions, into anything that will save us from the crushing weight of possibility. We say we want to be free, but we secretly long to be told what to do. Not because we are weak, but because we are human, because the groundlessness of freedom, the nakedness of it, confronts us with the terror of our own power. And yet, buried in that terror lies something more, something holy, something unspoken. Sartre wasn't just pointing at the fear, he was pointing at what waits beyond it. So the real question isn't why do we fear freedom? The real question is, what does that fear reveal about who we truly are? What secret truth about the human psyche is exposed when all structures fall away? What does it mean to exist without a blueprint? And what kind of courage does it take to become your own God? This is the shadow at the heart of existence. Not the fear of death, not the fear of failure, but the fear that you are more free and more responsible than you've ever dared to imagine. Let's descend into that truth and find out why freedom doesn't feel like flying, but like falling. So why does freedom, a word we worship in public discourse, feel so terrifying when it's actually within reach? The answer is buried deep within the structure of the human psyche. And it begins with a painful truth that thinkers like Sartre, Nietzsche, Jung, and Schopenhauer refuse to ignore. We are not wired for infinite possibility. We crave certainty, structure, and stories that tell us who we are. Not because we are lazy, but because we are afraid. afraid of chaos, afraid of meaninglessness, afraid of becoming lost in the vast openness of existence. From the moment you are born, your identity is shaped for you. You're given a name, a nationality, a religion, a gender. You're told what success looks like, what love means, what is good and what is evil. You inherit a map of life, drawn by others, and rarely question who drew it or why. And for a while, that map feels safe. It tells you where to go, how to behave, and most seductively, what to believe. You become fluent in the language of belonging. You learn to nod when others nod, to feel what others feel, and to never ask the question that threatens it all. Who am I, really? But at some point, the map fails. Maybe you lose someone. Maybe your career falls apart. Maybe you wake up one morning, surrounded by everything you thought you wanted, and feel nothing. And in that silence, a terrifying door opens, the door to freedom. But freedom doesn't greet you with open arms. It stares at you like a mirror, asking the one question that undoes every illusion. What will you do now that no one is watching? It is here that Sartre's existentialism begins to breathe. He argued that existence precedes essence, that we are not born with a fixed nature or divine purpose. We simply are, thrown into the world, blank, untethered, and condemned to define ourselves through our choices. There is no cosmic script, no pre-writ, role to play, just the unbearable responsibility of authorship. And this is where the fear begins, because if there's no God watching, if there's no ultimate meaning baked into the universe, then every value, every action, every identity must be chosen. And more than chosen, it must be lived, defended, created through your own hands and your own suffering. There is no escape, not even in silence. As Sartre famously put it, even not choosing is a choice. But what happens when we look away from that mirror? What happens when we deny our freedom? We begin to lie, not to others, but to ourselves. Sartre called it bad faith, mauvaise foi, the act of pretending we are not free when in truth we are. Imagine a man who works a job he hates but insists he has no choice because he has a family to support, or a woman who clings to a toxic relationship saying, "This is just how love works," or someone who blindly follows cultural traditions they no longer believe in because questioning them would mean facing the void. These are not passive victims, they are active participants in their own imprisonment. Not because they are foolish, but because the alternative, standing naked in front of life and saying, "I choose who I am," feels unbearable. Carl Jung approached this terror from a different direction. He said that much of what we call the self is actually a mask, a persona we wear to fit into the expectations of society. But beneath that mask lives the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress, reject, or fear. The more we conform to external definitions, the more that shadow grows. And the more we avoid our freedom, the more it haunts us. This is why freedom doesn't always feel liberating, because the moment you claim it, the shadow rises. The part of you that's been silenced for years, the buried desires, the rage, the longing, the wild creativity, begins to knock, and suddenly you realize, to be free is not just to act without permission, it is to confront everything you've buried in the name of being acceptable. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this coming. He believed most people are terrified of freedom because it requires the destruction of what he called slave morality, the borrowed values of herd thinking. To Nietzsche, freedom was not comfort. It was fire, a tearing down, a rebirth. The Übermensch, his ideal human, was not someone who fit in. It was someone who had stared into the abyss, destroyed the false gods of society, and created their own values from the ground up. He wrote, "You must become the master of your own chaos." But most of us don't want to be masters of chaos. We want simplicity, direction, validation, which is why modern society, though outwardly free, is inwardly addicted to obedience. We obey fashion, we obey trends, we obey social media algorithms. We obey ideologies, lifestyles, personalities, and systems that give us the illusion of choice while keeping us comfortably numb. And we wonder why we feel empty. Arthur Schopenhauer, ever the pessimist, believed that most human suffering comes from our will, our endless desire to escape pain and find lasting satisfaction, only to realize that neither is possible. To him, the human being was trapped in a cycle of craving and disappointment, and so, perhaps, freedom terrifies us because it offers no final relief, just an endless horizon of choices, each one requiring courage, sacrifice, and uncertainty. And yet, something else emerges beneath these grim insights. Because while Sartre told us we are condemned to be free, he also insisted that freedom is the only source of authenticity, the only path to meaning. You may not choose the conditions of your birth, you may not control your biology, your history, or even the tragedies that shape you, but you always choose what those things mean and who you become in response. Freedom is terrifying not because it is empty, but because it is raw potential, and the empty cells. The moment you realize that no one is coming to define your life for you, you become something else, the author. The page is blank, the pen is in your hand, and no one else is writing. But before you can write a single word, you must face everything in you that's afraid to begin. Because to be free, to truly be free, you must walk into the fire of your own being and return with a self you forged, not inherited. And that, perhaps, is the price of becoming real. You rarely notice it happening. The erosion of your freedom doesn't arrive with fanfare or flashing warnings. It happens slowly, quietly. Like fog creeping over a valley, it smothers without violence. It starts with small decisions you avoid making, questions you don't want to ask, desires you don't let yourself feel, a life you hesitate to imagine. And soon, without realizing it, you are living someone else's idea of who you should be, not because you were forced, but because you never challenged the script. This is the trap, not dictatorship, not tyranny, but a subtler form of control. Self-abandonment in the name of comfort. Jean-Paul Sartre saw this coming. He warned that when we deny our freedom, we don't just lose possibility, we lose our authentic self. We become shadows of what we could have been, actors in a play we didn't write but refuse to leave. You go to a job you despise, not because you are powerless, but because you've been conditioned to believe that meaning comes from productivity. You stay in relationships that deaden your soul, not because you don't deserve more, but because you've absorbed the myth that suffering is noble. You follow trends and beliefs you never chose, not because they speak to your truth, but because being accepted feels safer than being real. And it works. For a while. You numb the tension. You find distraction in entertainment. You decorate the walls of your psychologist's prison with ambition, consumption, and routine. You call it adulting, you call it success, you call it doing what needs to be done, but somewhere beneath the noise, a voice keeps whispering, "This isn't who I really am." And that whisper, ignored long enough, becomes illness. It becomes depression, it becomes addiction, it becomes anxiety, burnout, rage, and disconnection. Gabor Mate, a physician who spent decades studying trauma and addiction, made a chilling observation. Addiction is not about pleasure. It's about the pain of being disconnected from yourself. And what disconnects you more completely than the denial of your own freedom? When you abandon the responsibility of becoming who you are, when you silence your longings, reject your agency, or outsource your truth, you begin to rot from the inside out. The soul collapses, not instantly, but incrementally. You begin to perform rather than live, react rather than choose, conform rather than become. And here lies the cruel paradox. The more you avoid freedom, the heavier its weight becomes. You might obey every rule, meet every expectation, fulfill every societal role, and still wake up one day, hollow and unrecognizable. Because even a perfectly executed performance will never satisfy the soul that knows it is pretending. This is the unseen consequence of unclaimed freedom. You will still suffer, but your suffering will have no meaning. You will still age, but without the pride of authorship. You will still die, but without ever having lived as yourself. And if you don't pause, if you never turn inward, this existential erosion will disguise itself as normal. But how does this happen at scale? How does an entire society become afraid of its own liberation? The answer is as psychological as it is cultural. Because freedom is not just a personal challenge, it's a collective threat to any system that depends on obedience. Modern society, for all its declarations of liberty, does not reward self-authorship. It rewards compliance, predictability, and identity by algorithm. From an early age, you are taught not how to think, but what to think. Not how to create meaning, but how to follow the one prescribed. Not how to explore your essence, but how to shape it into marketable categories. The education system trains conformity. Corporate life rewards obedience. Social media punishes nonconformity. Even therapy at times becomes a tool to help you function within a broken system instead of helping you question its foundations. And the scariest part, most of this conditioning happens beneath your awareness. Neuroscience reveals that over 90% of your daily behaviors are habitual, run on subconscious programming shaped by environment, repetition, and emotional association. You don't decide how to feel about freedom, you absorb a story about it. And what is that story? That freedom is dangerous, that too many choices will paralyze you, that the individual must sacrifice for the group, that it's better to follow than to fail. That truth is found in consensus, not in confrontation. This is how societies maintain order, not through brute force, but through narrative saturation, through invisible norms that dictate what's possible before you've even imagined it. And so the fear of freedom becomes cultural inheritance, a shared hallucination passed down through generations. Don't stand out, don't question too much, don't dream too big. It's for your own good. This fear is not biological, it's learned. You were taught to fear the very thing that could set you free. Even language reflects this. We call people lost when they leave the known path. We call them crazy when they reject the norms. We call them dangerous when they speak truth that doesn't fit the narrative. But maybe they're not lost. Maybe they're not crazy. Maybe they're not dangerous. Maybe they're just free. And we don't know how to deal with that. Because when someone lives freely, without apology, it exposes the prison we're still in. It reveals what we've refused to face, that we are capable of more than we've dared to imagine. And that realization is painful. Because then you must ask, what dreams did I abandon to feel safe? What parts of myself have I silenced to be accepted? What life could I have lived if I had chosen differently? The longer you avoid those questions, the louder your psyche will scream. Not with words, but with symptoms, with disconnection, with meaninglessness, with resentment, with the haunting sense that time is slipping away and you haven't yet begun to live. This is not abstract philosophy, it is psychological reality. When you deny your freedom, your soul begins to die. But when you reclaim it, when you finally stop performing and start becoming, the world begins to shift. Not because it changes, but because you do. You begin to see through the illusions. You begin to hear your own voice again. You begin to realize that the terrifying door of freedom was never a threat. It was an invitation to create, to confront, to transform, to become. But before that transformation can begin, one thing must happen. You must rebel. Rebellion doesn't always look like fire in the streets. Sometimes it begins with silence, a long, uncomfortable pause after someone asks, "What do you want to do with your life?" And instead of giving the answer you've always given, the one that makes everyone nod in approval, you say, "I don't know." That moment, small, awkward, easy to overlook, is the spark. Because in that moment, you stop lying. You stop pretending that the roles you've been playing are enough. You stop parroting inherited dreams. You stop clinging to the mask. That is where rebellion starts, with truth. Not external defiance, but inner confrontation. Not shouting at the world, but finally listening to the quiet voice within, the one you've ignored, repressed, or drowned in the noise of shoulds and musts. Rebellion, real rebellion, is when you decide to reclaim your authorship, to face the terrifying blank page of your life, and write. But before you can write, you must unlearn. Unlearn the lies that made you afraid to begin. Lies like, success is defined by status. You have no choice. Your worth comes from being useful. You must earn love by fitting in. Freedom will make you lonely. You must dismantle these illusions brick by brick, knowing full well that part of you will resist. Because the ego doesn't want freedom. It wants familiarity. It wants to be seen, approved of, and kept safe. And freedom threatens all of that. That's why your first rebellion will feel like death, not of your body, but of your identity, of the version of you that was built to survive a world that never saw the real you. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming your whole self by integrating the unconscious, the shadow, the suppressed parts you've exiled to be accepted. Jung didn't believe in healing through comfort. He believed in healing through wholeness, and wholeness demands that you walk through the dark halls of your psyche, the shame, the rage, the longing, and claim them not as flaws, but as fragments of your truth. To break free, you must descend into the myths you've swallowed, into the memories you've buried, into the instincts you've judged. And when you emerge, you are no longer the obedient citizen of someone else's story. You are the sovereign of your own. Jean-Paul Sartre didn't offer a roadmap for this rebellion. He didn't believe in final answers. But he insisted on one thing, that freedom is an action, not a concept. It's not a state of mind. It's not a t-shirt slogan. It is a radicant, adult responsibility to choose, to create, and to accept the consequences of your choices. So how do you begin? You begin by choosing, even when it's hard, even when it scares you, especially when it scares you. You choose to tell the truth in a world that profits from your dishonesty. You choose to walk away from things that are killing your spirit, even if they look good on paper. You choose to listen to your longing, even when it pulls you into the unknown. You choose to say no to the roles, identities, and beliefs that no longer feel like home. And you choose to live without a script, even if it means stumbling, failing, or starting over. That is freedom. Not perfection, but authorship. Not certainty, but courage. Not safety, but presence. And here's the paradox. The more you choose, the more grounded you become. Not because the world becomes less chaotic, but because you do. Because you stop needing the world to define you. You stop waiting for permission. You stop outsourcing your existence. Friedrich Nietzsche called this process self-overcoming. He believed that humans could transcend themselves, not by conforming to higher ideals, but by destroying the inherited lies within and forging new values from the ashes. The Übermensch is not a perfect person. It is the one who dares to revalue everything, who says yes to life even when it's terrifying, who creates meaning not from dogma, but from depth. To break free, you must become your own standard. Not in arrogance, but in authenticity. Not in isolation, but in integrity. And that's when the true rebellion begins, not just against society, but against the parts of yourself that still crave captivity, the part that wants to be told what to do, the part that finds comfort in victimhood, the part that sabotages your growth because freedom feels too big to hold. You must meet those parts with compassion, but not obedience. You must say to them, I see you, I understand you, but we are going anyway. This rebellion will look different for everyone. For some it means quitting the job. For others it means staying, but on new terms. For some it means leaving a relationship. For others it means finally showing up in one. For some it means creating art. For others it means sitting in stillness. For some it means saying no. For others it means finally saying yes. But whatever it looks like, it must be yours, not copied, not borrowed, not approved, yours. And as you live this way, as you keep choosing, keep falling, keep becoming, something begins to shift, not outside you, but within. The fear doesn't vanish, but it transforms. It becomes a kind of sacred pressure, a reminder that you are alive, awake, and forging something real. You stop asking, what should I do? And you begin asking, what truth wants to live through me? You stop hiding from your potential, and you begin rising to meet it. This is not easy, it is not glamorous, it will not always make you popular or successful or understood, but it will make you whole, and it will make you free. And perhaps in the end, that is the only real success. To look back at your life and know that you didn't just follow the script. You wrote something of your own. You've burned the script, you've walked away from the lies, you've begun to live as the author of your own life. But now, standing in the silence beyond all borrowed meaning, a deeper question remains, one that no book, no philosophy, no teacher can answer for you. What will you do with your freedom now that no one is watching? This is where most turn back, not because they are weak, but because freedom, fully embraced, does not lead to comfort. It leads to the void, the raw, sacred space where no identity remains, and nothing protects you from the truth. And that truth is this: you are alone. Utterly, metaphysically, terrifyingly alone. Not in the shallow sense. Not loneliness from lack of connection, but existential aloneness. The kind Sartre wrote of when he said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." There is no meaning until you create it, no essence until you define it, no morality until you embody it. You are the god of your own world, and there is no one left to blame. This realization is not poetic. It is brutal, because it strips away every excuse you've ever held on to. You can't hide behind your upbringing. You can't blame society forever. You can't delay your life until someone gives you permission. There is no permission. There is only presence. There is only this moment and the terrifying responsibility to shape it. That's what Sartre meant when he said we are condemned to be free. Because freedom is not a choice. It is your nature. You were born into it. You cannot escape it. Even refusing to choose is a choice. Even doing nothing is a declaration. Even running away is a direction. And so the final, most powerful realization is this: you are the source, not of everything, but of your meaning, of your direction, of your becoming. The universe does not hand you a purpose. You must look into the abyss and etch one into being with your bare hands. And this is where the story could become unbearable, if it weren't for something astonishing, something that emerges only after the fear, the rebellion, the unlearning, when the false self has been shed and only the essential remains. You realize, you were never afraid of freedom itself. You were afraid of its mirror, of what it would show you, of the parts of you that had been hidden for so long, of the dreams you buried, the rage you denied, the wildness you sedated. You feared the light that might shine on everything you are and everything you could be. Because the terrifying truth about freedom is not that it forces you to be alone, it's that it forces you to be real. And that's the true miracle. Because in becoming real, you also become free from fear, not because fear disappears, but because you are no longer owned by it. The chains fall off, not because the world changes, but because you stop accepting the weight as natural. You stop waiting to be told who to be. You stop asking for permission to feel what you feel. You stop performing, defending, shrinking, numbing, and you begin to live, fully, messily, beautifully. You begin to make art not to be seen, but to express truth. You begin to love not to be validated, but to become more whole. You begin to speak not to impress, but to connect. You begin to walk paths with no names, write stories with no templates, dream futures no one else dares to imagine. Because now you understand, freedom is not a destination, it is a way of being, and it is sacred. You are not here to be obedient. You are not here to fit a mold. You are not here to play a part. You are here to confront the chaos and build something only you could build. And yes, it will cost you comfort, reputation, predictability, even your old self. But what you receive in return is something priceless. A life lived with your eyes open, a heart that belongs to no one but yourself, a soul unbound by shame, a reality that feels alive. This is what Sartre wanted us to see, not just the burden of freedom, but its sacred power. He wasn't trying to frighten us with the idea that there is no ultimate meaning. He was trying to show us the divine power in creating it. Because if nothing defines you, then everything is possible. If no one is coming to save you, then you are the hero you've been waiting for. If life has no meaning, then you are the artist of your own existence. This isn't nihilism, this is existential creation. This is the holy moment when you realize you are the answer to your own question. And from here, something truly remarkable happens. You begin to see others differently. Not as roles, not as enemies, not as extensions of your story, but as other sovereign beings, each condemned to their own freedom, each carrying their own burden, each struggling to write their truth in a world that rarely encourages it. And this creates a new kind of empathy, not the empathy of pity, but the empathy of recognition. You stop trying to control others. You stop demanding that they believe what you believe. You stop needing them to validate your path, because you know how hard it is to walk your own. And in that space, between fear and becoming, between aloneness and connection, a different kind of meaning is born, one not handed down from on high, but forged in the fire of your own experience. It is not comfortable, it is not final, but it is real, and maybe that is the ultimate truth. Freedom is terrifying because it is sacred, because it demands that you show up fully, because it refuses to let you hide, because it will cost you everything that isn't truly you, but in return, it gives you your soul. And once you've tasted that, once you've felt the cold wind of the void against your skin and stood your ground, no cage will ever fit again. You will walk differently, you will speak differently, you will live differently, because you will know you are free and you are finally ready to bear it.